As expected, global defence expenditure actually rose marginally in 2014 to just under $1.6 trillion. The increase was about 0.85%, which is marginal, but it's also significant given that we've had 4 years of defence budget cuts since 2010. A major cause of this increase was due to the slowdown in the rate of cuts in the US. However, that's likely to end in 2016 as we do see cuts continuing as a result of sequestration and continuing cuts to the overseas contingency operations budget. Another factor causing the increase in 2014 was strong growth in the MENA and Russia and CIS region. Over the last 3 years, these two regions have both achieved growth of 9% in real terms, which is significant, but we do see a slowdown in the MENA region over the next few years, given the reduction in oil price that we've seen at the end of 2014. Concern over developments in the Ukraine actually caused Eastern European markets to begin increasing again after 3 years of significant cuts there. In terms of individual markets, Ukraine achieved the highest growth in 2014 of around 30%. At the other end of the spectrum, the 20 fastest declining markets, 13 of which were NATO. The largest market in the world, the US, experienced the third highest cuts over the last 3 years. As a proportion of GDP, global defence spending continues to decline. In 2014, it dropped to about 2.1% of GDP, and based on our current projections in our annual reports, we do expect this to continue to decline and fall below 2% of GDP threshold by 2016. So therefore, any increases in defence spending are not an impetus towards defence, but rather in line with economic growth. As with overall defence expenditure, defence investment budgets also increased last year. Procurement and RDT&E were the first budget lines to be cut in the wake of the financial crisis. But we do now expect growth in procurement to actually exceed growth in defence spending going forward. While the trend for total procurement was positive, RDT&E spending actually stalled over the last few years, and that's because of the distribution of spending within both of these budget lines. So procurement spending is more evenly distributed among regions, whereas RDT&E, over 2/3 is still spent by the US, so any cuts there have an impact on overall R&D spending more so than on procurement spending. Despite the positive trend in procurement spending over the last year, this growth is expected to start to decline in the next few years as the regions that have been pushing this growth, MENA and Russia and the CIS, they're both facing difficulties in increasing their budgets by as much as they used to. We do expect the growth in procurement spending to begin to slow from 2015, and that's due to a more cautious approach to defence spending in the MENA region. Procurement budgets in MENA increased by 14% over the last 3 years on average, and going forward we only see 5% growth. In total, an estimated $1.9 trillion is expected to be spent on defence procurement over the next 6 years. Furthermore, we do expect about $640 billion to be spent on defence R&D. In 2014, 6 of the 10 fastest growing markets were in MENA. Only 1 was in Asia Pacific, that would be New Zealand. But next year this could all change. Asia Pacific is a net positive beneficiary of lower oil prices, so that means that they're now able to increase spending by more than they have done in the past. Over the last 5 years, the region experienced about 3% growth, and we now expect it to reach 5%. So next year we do expect to see more Asia Pacific countries in the top 10. The JDB annual report finds that going forward in the short term will be a period of delicate equilibrium where you have cuts in the West being offset by increases in the emerging markets. And whether these increases can actually compensate for cuts in the West still remains to be seen. Total global defence spending, whether it increases or decreases, really depends on the movements in 1 or 2 major markets.